The dragon at the market. Lena Martinez had always believed in practical things. Gravity kept her feet on the ground, instant noodles kept her fed during late shifts, and routine kept her sane. She didn't believe in omens or destiny, just the steady rhythm of work, sleep, and the occasional splurge on real coffee instead of the synthetic stuff. The morning started wrong from the moment she stepped outside her apartment block in District 8. The air tasted different, sharp and ionized like the moment before lightning strikes. It made her skin prickle beneath her worn jacket, the one with the blue patch where she'd spilled curry months ago. Zo-9 was a typical mid-tier colony, built into a terraformed asteroid that spun lazily through space. The artificial gravity generators hummed constantly, a sound so familiar that silence would have been unnerving. Purple light from the nearby dwarf star filtered through the atmospheric processors, casting everything in perpetual twilight. As a supply dispatcher, Lena coordinated shipments for the small freight runners who passed through the system. It was honest work that paid just enough, not well, not poorly, but enough to keep a roof over her head and food in her belly. Walking through the market sector that morning, she noticed people staring. Not at her exactly, but through her, as if she carried something invisible and significant. A group of alotes, tall, beetle-backed aliens with iridescent green carapaces, hissed softly as she passed. Their compound eyes tracked her movement with unsettling intensity. At the corner of 6th and Hydron, she saw him. The dragon stood awkwardly beside a fruit vendor's stall, his massive claws struggling with a human-designed payment scanner. He was old, ancient even by dragon standards. His scales were dulled and scarred, his once magnificent wings folded and frayed at the edges. The horns that should have been his crown were chipped and worn, and his eyes held the faded quality of old holograms. The crowd gave him a wide berth, not from fear but from pity. This wasn't a creature to be feared anymore. His fire glands looked sealed shut, probably corroded with age. He clutched a small bag containing 3 protein apples, some dried herbs, and a bottle of mineral water, barely 10 credits worth of supplies. "Need a hand?" Lena asked, the words escaping before her common sense could stop them. The dragon turned slowly, those ancient eyes blinking with surprise. When he spoke, his voice was like gravel scraped over steel. "The scanner will not acknowledge my biometric signature." Lena looked at the pathetic collection of groceries, then at the proud creature reduced to struggling with basic technology. Without thinking, she held her wrist over the scanner and authorized the payment. Transaction confirmed, the machine chirped. A few bystanders stared. The alotes hissed again, louder this time. "You shouldn't have done that," the dragon rumbled, his voice carrying undertones of something that might have been warning. "Not for me." Lena shrugged. "I had extra credits from last night's shift. Besides, we've all been stuck in line before." The dragon's pupils contracted, then dilated as he studied her face. "You are from Soul lineage?" "Yeah, 3rd-generation Martian. My family came out here during the last colonial surge." The dragon nodded as if this explained something important. Then, with surprising grace for something so large, he bowed, a formal gesture that seemed to come from muscle memory deeper than thought. "Your kindness is not small," he said quietly, "though it may seem so." Before Lena could respond, he turned and melted into the crowd with surprising stealth, leaving her standing with a receipt that showed an unusual notation, "Recognition logged." She didn't think much of it then. She should have. The rest of the day passed in a haze of routine disruptions. Her dispatch terminal kept glitching, the central coordinator called in sick, and the coffee machine seemed personally offended by her existence. By noon, the communications array had crashed entirely, flooding her screens with garbled alien script. Then her personal communicator rang, a rare event that immediately put her on edge. "Lena Martinez," she answered cautiously. Human designation Lena Martinez, came a mechanical, heavily filtered voice. "Stand by for contact. Your kindness has been marked by the 12. Do not resist." The line went dead, leaving Lena staring at her communicator in bewilderment. Outside her office window, the sky had taken on an odd quality, too green, too layered, as if something was refracting the light in impossible ways. She packed up early and headed home, her manager nowhere to be found and her co-workers too absorbed in their own problems to notice her leaving. The express tram to District 8 felt slower than usual, each stop stretching into uncomfortable silence. When she disembarked at her station, the first thing she noticed was the absence. The noodle vendor who always worked the corner was gone. The kids who played holographic games by the transit bench had vanished. Even the usual crowd of commuters had thinned to nothing. Lena walked the familiar path to her apartment building, her footsteps echoing in the unusual quiet. She paused at the entrance, key in hand, and looked up. 12 ships hung in the sky above her building. They were beautiful in their terrible precision, bone-white, shaped like elongated arrowheads, covered in shifting geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Alot warships, sleek and silent, hovering motionless in the purple twilight. No weapons were visible. No alarm sounded. They simply waited, as if the entire universe had paused to take a breath. Lena stood frozen on the sidewalk, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. In that moment of crystalline clarity, she remembered the dragon's eyes, how they had looked at her not as a stranger, but as something significant. Something that mattered. The ships began to descend, one by one, moving with deliberate slowness toward her apartment block. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Lena realized that her simple act of kindness had just changed everything. The envoy's warning. The ships didn't land so much as suspend themselves like artificial stars caught in low orbit. From below, Lena could see their underbellies were covered in rotating geometric patterns, alot glyphs, she assumed, though she'd never learned to read their complex script. The ships hummed with barely audible power, a vibration she felt in her bones rather than heard. Her personal communicator lit up again, this time projecting a tight holographic beam around her wrist. Lena of soul lineage, the mechanical voice repeated. You have extended honor. The 12 respond. I didn't do anything, she said aloud, her voice catching between panic and confusion. That's where you're wrong. Lena spun around. The speaker was a man, or humanoid, at least. He was broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like the remnants of a formal diplomatic coat. The fabric shimmered faintly, as if reacting to her attention. He appeared mostly human except for the vertical slits that replaced his pupils and a faint metallic sheen along his jawline that suggested nanomesh implants. Who are you? She demanded, backing toward her building's entrance. I'm here to make sure you don't accidentally start a war, he said with unsettling cheerfulness. Name's Arlen Kane, liaison for the Interpolitical Stability Accord. But that's not important right now. Okay, Lena said, raising her hands in a gesture somewhere between surrender and exasperation. Let me get this straight. I bought a dragon some groceries this morning, and now I have enough firepower above my building to level a small moon. Want to explain that? Arlen's expression managed to be both impressed and mildly horrified. You bought groceries for General Zirith Veltherin, vanquisher of the Forge Systems and exiled Prime Flame of the Eastern Front. I saw an old dragon struggling with a payment scanner. An old dragon who happens to be a disgraced war hero, Arlen said. And now 12 Alot ships have initiated the right of return above your dwelling. Do you have any idea how many interstellar laws that potentially violates? Lena blinked. Why would they care about me helping some random? Because the Alot don't give the right of return lightly, Arlen interrupted. Not even to their own people. It's a sacred response, a return of honor. It's not ceremonial, it's binding. And apparently, you now have the loyalty of a disgraced war god who still has followers tucked into every spiral arm of the galaxy. The weight of his words hit her like a physical blow. Lena staggered back a step, her knees threatening to buckle. But I didn't ask for this. You didn't have to. That's the point. Arlen gestured toward the hovering ships. You honored someone they cast down. Tradition demands they acknowledge it, even if it makes them uncomfortable. Above them, the ships began to hum louder, not threatening, but reverent, like a mechanical choir. The street around them had gone eerily silent. No neighbors peered from windows, no police drones patrolled the area. A soft blue shimmer at the edge of her vision suggested the area had been quarantined, probably by the Alot themselves. Okay, Lena said, rubbing her forehead where a headache was building. What happens now? That depends, Arlen replied. Do you want to rule a star sector, be assassinated by political enemies, or possibly trigger a diplomatic incident that collapses the fragile peace we've built since the Scorch Wars? I'm going with none of the above, she muttered. Well, Arlen said, you'd better come with me then. He led her to what appeared to be a standard delivery shuttle parked a few blocks away. But the moment they stepped inside, Lena realized this was no ordinary vehicle. The interior gleamed with adaptive technology and military-grade response protocols. As soon as the doors sealed, she felt the subtle pressure of an active distortion field humming around them. They lifted off straight up, and from the air, Lena saw her neighborhood transformed. The entire district was wrapped in soft blue perimeter lines, containment walls the Alot had deployed faster than any government force could have reacted. The 12 ships floated above her apartment block like silent guardians, waiting for some signal only they understood. They're not doing anything yet, Lena observed. They're waiting, Arlen confirmed. More precisely, they're waiting for you. Waiting for what? Your answer. Answer to what? Arlen turned toward her, his voice dropping to something more serious than his earlier casual tone. The dragon you helped, he wasn't just exiled. He was erased. His name was stripped from their records after he refused to torch the civilian settlements of Velatri during the Eastern Campaign. The Alot military considered that treason. And his followers? Those who survived see him as something else entirely. A martyr. An ideal. The last true flame-bearer who chose conscience over conquest. The implications began to sink in, each one heavier than the last. So helping him doesn't just buy you a rebellion, Arlen finished grimly. It buys you his redemption. And that, Lena Martinez, might be worth more than you realize, or more dangerous than you can imagine. As their shuttle climbed higher into Zone 9's artificial atmosphere, Lena caught a glimpse of more ships in the distance. Not Alot vessels this time, but human military craft and various alien diplomatic carriers, all converging on their small colony world. Word was spreading. And whatever came next, there would be no going back to her quiet life of supplied dispatches and instant noodles. The galaxy was watching, and somehow, a woman who'd never wanted anything more than a predictable routine had become the center of something vast and terrible and possibly magnificent. The War Council. The shuttle docked with a larger vessel hidden in Zone 9's asteroid shadow, a mobile diplomatic station that officially didn't exist. Inside, representatives from a dozen species crowded around a holographic display showing their small colony world, now bristling with ships from every major power in the sector. 17 hours, announced a severe-looking woman in a crisp military uniform. That's how long we have before someone does something irreversibly stupid. Arlen guided Lena to a chair at the central table. Commander Chen, meet Lena Martinez. The inadvertent catalyst of our current crisis. Commander Chen studied Lena with calculating eyes. Ms. Martinez, do you understand what you've set in motion? I'm beginning to get the picture, Lena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Though I still don't understand why buying an old dragon some fruit is causing a galactic incident. Because, interrupted a new voice, you have forced them to confront their shame. Lena turned to see the speaker, a tall, graceful being with blue-tinted skin and elaborate cranial ridges. She recognized the species, a Vellani, one of the galaxy's premier diplomatic races. I am Ambassador Kethtar, the Vellani continued. And I have spent the last 3 years trying to prevent exactly this situation. Which situation would that be? Lena asked. The one where General Zirith becomes a symbol again, Commander Chen answered. The Alot spent considerable effort making him disappear after the Velatri incident. A war hero who refused orders and spoke out against civilian casualties. He became inconvenient very quickly. Ambassador Kethtar activated a holographic display showing a younger version of the dragon Lena had met, massive, magnificent, wreathed in flame as he stood before what appeared to be a military tribunal. Zirith Veltherin was once the most decorated general in the Alot military. He won 17 major campaigns and was personally responsible for expanding their territory by 3 systems. What changed? Lena asked, though she suspected she already knew. Velatri Prime, Arlen said quietly. Agricultural world, 2 billion civilians. The Alot military wanted to use it as an example, burn the settlements to force a quicker surrender from the resistance. And Zirith refused, Lena guessed. More than refused, Commander Chen corrected. He withdrew his entire battle group and publicly denounced the order. Called it, the death of honor in service of expedience. The display shifted to show news footage, riots in Alot cities, protests demanding Ziritha's reinstatement, military units declaring loyalty to their disgraced general rather than their government. The Alot Empire nearly tore itself apart, Ambassador Kethtar explained. Civil war was averted only by Ziritha's exile and the systematic erasure of his achievements from official records. But you can't erase people's memories, Lena said. No, Arlen agreed. And that's where it gets complicated. See, there are still plenty of Alot who believe Zirith was right. They've been waiting for something, anything, that might restore his honor and give them an excuse to challenge the current military doctrine. And I just handed them that excuse. You demonstrated that a human, a member of a species the Alot consider honorable but naive, recognized Ziritha's worth when his own people refused to, Commander Chen said. In Alot culture, that kind of validation carries enormous weight. The holographic display shifted again, showing tactical readouts from around the galaxy. Within 6 hours of the right of return being declared, 17 separate Alot military units declared their loyalty to the restored flame, Ambassador Kethtar reported. 3 system governors have recalled their fleets to maintain local stability. And at least 2 major trade guilds have suspended operations pending resolution of the honor debt. Lena felt sick. I've started a civil war. Not yet, Arlen said. But you've lit the fuse on one that's been waiting to happen for years. So what are my options? Commander Chen leaned back in her chair. Officially, you could denounce your action, claim cultural ignorance, and let the Alot handle their internal affairs however they see fit. Which means letting them exile Zirith again and probably execute his supporters this time. Yes. Or, Ambassador Kethtar said, you accept the role they've given you. Become the external validator of Ziritha's honor. Help him return from exile and face whatever consequences follow. Including civil war. Including the possibility of it, yes. Lena stared at the tactical display, watching the ships gather around their small world. Each dot represented thousands of beings, all drawn into a conflict that had started with her buying groceries for a lonely old dragon. There's a third option, she said finally. Which is? I talked to him. To Zirith. Face to face. The room fell silent. Finally, Commander Chen spoke. Ms. Martinez, with respect, this is a bit bigger than. No, Lena interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. It started with a conversation between 2 people at a fruit stand. Maybe it can end the same way. Arlen and the commander exchanged glances. The Alot fleet won't allow anyone near him without going through official channels, Commander Chen said. And official channels are precisely what we're trying to avoid. Then we don't go through them, Lena replied. I helped him once without asking permission. I can do it again. Ambassador Kethtar's head ridges shifted in what might have been approval. There is wisdom in simplicity. Sometimes the most complex problems require the most direct solutions. And sometimes direct solutions get everyone killed, Commander Chen muttered. But she was already pulling up ship schematics on her personal display. If we're going to do this, we'll need to be very careful. And very, very lucky. Outside the station's viewports, more ships continued to arrive, their running lights creating a constellation of potential violence around the small colony world where an ordinary woman had performed an extraordinary act of kindness. The Dragon's Choice. Getting past 12 Alot warships proved surprisingly easy. Arlen's diplomatic shuttle transmitted the proper codes, and they were escorted directly to the flagship, a massive vessel shaped like a cathedral made of bone and steel. The Alot, it seemed, were as bound by their traditions as they were empowered by them. Lena followed a silent escort through corridors that seemed more grown than built, their walls covered in the same shifting geometric patterns she'd seen on the ship hulls. Everything was larger than human scale, designed for beings who valued both form and function in equal measure. They found Xerath in what might have been an observation deck, staring out at the stars through a transparent wall that curved away into infinity. He looked even older than he had at the market, his scales dulled almost to gray in the ship's blue-white lighting. "I wondered when you would come," he said without turning around. His voice carried the same gravelly quality, but now Lena could hear the exhaustion beneath it. "Did you know this would happen?" she asked. "When I helped you this morning, did you know it would lead to all this?" Xerath turned slowly, his ancient eyes meeting hers. "I hoped. I feared. I have lived too long to believe in accidents, but not long enough to stop believing in possibility. Your people are ready to tear their empire apart over this." "My people," Xerath said with bitter amusement, "cast me out for refusing to murder children. Now they want to use me as a symbol for the same principles they punished me for upholding. The irony is sharp." Lena walked to the observation wall, looking out at the gathering fleet. "What do you want?" "Really want, not what everyone else thinks you should want." "I want the luxury of irrelevance," Xerath said quietly. "I want to buy fruit at markets and struggle with payment scanners and be no one in particular to anyone who matters. But I am tired of watching honor die by degrees. Tired of seeing expedience triumph over conscience. Tired of being the symbol of a path not taken while those who need that path are silenced or worse." The dragon moved to stand beside her, his massive bulk somehow managing not to be intimidating. "You gave me something I had forgotten existed," he continued. "Simple kindness, freely offered, expecting nothing in return. It reminded me why I chose exile over compromise in the first place." "So what happens now?" "Now," Xerath said, "I face a choice I have avoided for 3 years. Remain in irrelevant safety, or accept that some symbols matter more than the comfort of those who bear them." Before Lena could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The escort who had brought them stepped forward, speaking rapid Alot that Lena couldn't understand. "What is it?" she asked. Xerath's head lifted, his eyes suddenly sharp and focused. "Imperial fleet. 3 battle groups, approaching fast." Through the observation wall, Lena could see new lights appearing in the distance, harder, more aggressive shapes than the ceremonial vessels of the Rite of Return. "They're not here to talk," Xerath said grimly. "Can your supporters handle them?" "My supporters are scientists, teachers, young idealists who believe the military should serve something higher than itself. The Imperial fleet is composed of career killers who see dissent as treason." Xerath's claws scraped against the floor. This was always going to end in blood. The only question was whose. Lena watched the approaching ships, feeling the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. What if there was another way? Such as? What if you surrendered? Xerath's head snapped toward her. "You would have me abandon those who have risked everything for. Not abandon them. Led them." Lena turned to face the ancient general. "You said honor was dying by degrees. Maybe it's time to show them what living honor looks like." "I do not understand." "You face trial. Publicly. You make them confront what they did to you, make them explain why conscience is treason and why following orders matters more than protecting the innocent. You turn their own legal system into a platform for the principles they're trying to silence." Zirith was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. They would not execute me, he said finally. Not publicly, not with so much attention on the proceedings. But they would ensure I disappeared quietly afterward. Maybe. Or maybe you'd inspire enough people that disappearing you becomes impossible. And if you are wrong, then at least you'll have chosen your battlefield instead of letting them choose it for you. The dragon looked out at the approaching Imperial fleet, then at the ships filled with his supporters, young Alot who had risked everything for an ideal they'd never seen in action. There is wisdom in your words, he said. And terrible risk. The best choices usually have both. Zirith nodded slowly. Very well. I will surrender. But not to them. He gestured toward the Imperial fleet. To you. What? You are the external validator of my honor. In Alot law, that gives you certain rights. Including the right to demand formal justice rather than summary execution. Lena felt the galaxy shift around her again, the weight of unintended consequences settling on her shoulders. I don't know anything about Alot law. You know about right and wrong. Sometimes that is enough. The alarms stopped sounding, replaced by the hum of communications arrays working at full capacity. Negotiations were beginning, terms being offered and rejected, the delicate dance of potential warfare playing out in diplomatic channels. They're asking for my decision, Zirith said, listening to something Lena couldn't hear. Surrender to the Imperial fleet, or watch this system become a battlefield. And your answer? The ancient dragon straightened, and for a moment Lena could see the general he had been, proud, strong, magnificent in his certainty. My answer is that I surrender to the human who reminded me what honor means. Let them try to explain that to their tribunals. Outside the observation wall, the two fleets faced each other across the void, weapons powered but not yet firing, waiting for a decision that would ripple across the galaxy. And in that moment of poised possibility, Lena realized that her simple act of kindness hadn't just changed one dragon's life, it had become the fulcrum on which the future of an entire civilization would turn. The Trial of Stars. The trial took place 6 months later on Kethvar Prime, the neutral world that hosted the Galactic Court of Justice. Lena had spent those months learning Alot law, studying precedents, and trying not to think too hard about the fact that the fate of an entire species' moral compass rested partly on her shoulders. The courtroom was a vast amphitheater carved from living crystal, its walls pulsing with soft light that responded to the emotional resonance of the speakers. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the galleries, their attention focused on the simple dock where Zirith Veltherin sat in chains that were more ceremonial than practical. The defendant stands accused of treason, abandonment of duty, and incitement to rebellion, announced the chief prosecutor, an Alot whose scales gleamed with the oil-slick sheen of high political office. These are not crimes of passion but calculated acts of betrayal against the very empire that elevated him to glory. Lena stood at the advocate's podium, feeling ridiculously small in the vast space. She had no legal training, no diplomatic experience, no business being here at all. But Zirith had insisted, and Alot law was surprisingly accommodating to those who claimed the right of honor advocacy. Your honors, she began, her voice carrying clearly in the crystal chamber's perfect acoustics, I want to tell you about the morning I met a dragon at a fruit stand. She told them about Zirith's struggle with the payment scanner, about his dignity despite his exile, about the simple human impulse to help someone in need. She told them about the groceries, 3 protein apples, some herbs, a bottle of mineral water, and how such a small gesture had revealed the vast gulf between the Alot Empire's stated principles and its actual practices. The prosecution wants you to believe this is about military discipline, Lena continued, warming to her theme. But it's not. It's about what happens when following orders means abandoning everything that makes those orders worth following in the first place. The chief prosecutor objected, citing military necessity and the chain of command. The judges, a panel of 3 elder Alot whose scales had turned the deep blue of advanced age, listened with patient attention. Then Zirith was called to testify. He spoke for 3 hours, his voice never wavering as he described the Velatri campaign. The civilians huddled in agricultural settlements, the orders to burn them out regardless of casualties, the moment when he realized that victory without honor was just another word for atrocity. "I have killed in service to my people," he said, his words carrying the weight of centuries. "I have burned cities and broken fleets and done what was necessary to preserve our way of life. But when they asked me to murder children to save time, I remembered that our way of life was supposed to mean something." The crystal walls pulsed with deeper colors as emotion filled the chamber. "And what did your refusal cost us?" the chief prosecutor demanded during cross-examination. 6 additional months of warfare. 37,000 additional military casualties. And the preservation of my people's souls. The prosecution rested, confident in their case of facts and precedents and the clear letter of military law. Then Lena called her witnesses. They came forward one by one, Alot scientists who had worked on the terraforming projects that made civilian settlements possible, teachers who educated the young in the principles of honor and service, engineers who built the ships that carried their people to the stars. Each one testified about what Ziritha's refusal had meant to them, how it had restored their faith in the ideals they thought their civilization had abandoned. "We are not a people who murder for convenience," said Dr. Vothkar, an elderly scholar whose translation work had helped establish first contact with a dozen species. "We are explorers, builders, protectors of the flame of consciousness wherever we find it." General Veltherin reminded us of that when we needed reminding most. The final witness was unexpected. Commander Heltvash, the Alot officer who had replaced Zirith after his exile, requested permission to address the court. "I followed the orders that General Veltherin refused," he said, his voice barely audible in the vast chamber. "I burned the settlements of Velatri Prime. I killed civilians to expedite victory. And I have not slept peacefully since." The crystal walls blazed with crimson light as the chamber fell silent. "The defendant was court-martialed for refusing an order," Commander Heltvash continued. "I was promoted for following it. History will judge which of us served our people better." The trial concluded with closing arguments. The prosecution spoke of necessity, discipline, and the terrible cost of subordinates who placed personal conscience above military efficiency. Lena spoke of dragons and fruit stands and the simple truth that honor was not a luxury to be discarded when it became inconvenient, but the foundation upon which everything else was built. The judges deliberated for 7 hours. When they returned, the Chief Justice spoke in the formal high alot that was reserved for the most momentous occasions. "We find the defendant guilty of disobeying direct orders," she announced. "And we find that his guilt is precisely what makes him the leader our people need." The sentence was unprecedented. Zirith was stripped of his military rank and assigned to a new position, Chief Ethical Advisor to the Alot High Command, with the authority to review all military operations for compliance with their people's moral principles. "Let it be recorded," the Chief Justice continued, "that sometimes the highest loyalty is demonstrated through the courage to disobey." As the courtroom erupted in celebration and outrage in equal measure, Lena felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Zirith looking down at her with those ancient, patient eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "For seeing what I had forgotten about myself." "Thank you for reminding me what one person can do," Lena replied. Epilogue. 2 years later, Lena stood in the same market where it all began, watching Zirith negotiate with a fruit vendor over the price of imported Terran oranges. He still struggled with the payment scanner. His claws would never be designed for human technology, but now he laughed at his clumsiness instead of enduring it with quiet dignity. The Alot Empire had changed. Not overnight, not without resistance, but measurably. Military operations now required ethical review. Civilian casualties were investigated rather than ignored. Young Alot spoke openly about the difference between following orders and following conscience. It wasn't perfect. Change never was. But it was real, and it was spreading to other species who had watched the trial and begun asking their own difficult questions about power and responsibility. Lena had returned to her job as a supply dispatcher, though she now worked for the Galactic Ethics Council, coordinating aid shipments to worlds recovering from conflicts resolved through negotiation rather than force. It was still routine work, forms to file, schedules to coordinate, supplies to track. But now her routine served something larger than herself. "Still buying groceries for dragons?" Arlen asked, appearing beside her with his characteristic grin. He'd been promoted too, heading up a new department focused on preventing diplomatic crises before they required fleets of warships to resolve. "Just the one," Lena replied, watching Zirith finally complete his purchase with obvious satisfaction. "Though I've been thinking about expanding my customer base." She gestured toward a group of young beings from various species who were gathered around a holographic display, debating something with passionate intensity. They wore the silver armbands of the Conscience Brigade, a movement that had grown out of Ziritha's trial and spread across the galaxy like wildfire. "The universe is full of people who just need someone to see them," Lena continued. "Really see them, not what they've been labeled or what they're supposed to be, but who they actually are. Turns out that's not as common as it should be." Zirith approached, carrying his bag of oranges with the same careful dignity he'd shown with his protein apples 2 years ago. "The vendor remembers you," he told Lena. "She says you changed her life by showing her that small kindnesses matter." "Did I?" "You helped her see that every interaction is a choice. Every moment we meet another being, we choose whether to diminish them or honor them. Most of the time, we don't even realize we're choosing." Lena looked around the market, at the vendors and customers, the families and travelers, the countless small interactions that made up the fabric of daily life across the galaxy. Each one a choice, each one an opportunity. "What now?" she asked. Ziritha's eyes twinkled with something that might have been mischief. "Now we find more fruit stands." As they walked together through the market, the old dragon and the woman who had reminded him of his worth, the afternoon light of Zone 9's dwarf star painted everything in shades of possibility. Behind them, the young beings of the Conscience Brigade continued their passionate debate about justice and mercy, their voices carrying the hope of a galaxy slowly learning that honor was not just a word to be spoken in ceremonies, but a choice to be made every day. And in the quiet corners of 1,000 worlds, beings who had been forgotten or cast aside felt the ripples of that choice, saw in it the possibility that they too might matter, that their voices too might be heard, that kindness was not weakness but the strongest force in the universe. The fruit vendor waved as they passed, her gesture encompassing not just goodbye but gratitude for the reminder that every customer was someone's story, every sale an opportunity for connection, every day a chance to choose compassion over indifference. In the end, that was all it had ever been about. Not grand gestures or galaxy-spanning politics, but the simple recognition that everyone, dragon or human, exile or emperor, deserved to be seen, to be valued, to be treated with the dignity that came from merely existing in a universe vast enough to hold them all. The end.